Hello everyone, Dr. Stephen and the LB5236 class of 2020. My name is Vanna Tom and I'll be presenting about the Australian political economy. We will look at the early European settlement in Australia, the economic and political progression, the recessions and inflations, as well as the waves of migration throughout Australia's history. The Dutch were the first Europeans to discover Australia in 1606. It was not until 1770 that Captain James Cook landed in Botany Bay, modern-day Sydney, on behalf of the British Empire. By the time America, which was the British penal colony, had gained independence in 1766. And so Britain was looking for a new penal colony, and so decided to make Australia its penal colony. A penal colony is a colony where the British would send its convicts. And so in 1788, the first fleet of British ships carrying 1,000 convicts arrived in Port Jackson in modern-day Sydney, and the subsequent second and third fleets followed soon after. Upon arrival, the island was already occupied by the native Australians, so they saw a conflict with the natives which lasted up to 1930s. In that period, the native population was drastically decreased due to the wars. And for the first 25 years, there was no coin, so ram was the currency, used as the currency by the early settlers. Over the entire 19th century, six British colonies were established throughout Australia. In 1810, Governor Lachlan Macquarie of New South Wales allowed the convicts to work after they had served their time. He also freed up land for agriculture. Leading up to 1830s, whaling and sealing were the common commodities and the economic activity of Australia. Up to 1840, this was coupled with agriculture, especially pasturing and wool. The trade in this period was with British and the Western European colonies and Western European countries. And some banks were set up, the Bank of New South Wales as well as the Union Bank of Australia in the 1830s to finance the trade. In the 1840s also, silver, lead and copper were discovered and mined in Australia, and they saw a wave of migration, and the mining was alongside the agriculture boom, and the economic activities attracted British capital investment. However, in the late 1840s, there was a drought which affected the pasturing and the wool industry. In 1850s, gold was discovered in Victoria and in New South Wales, and this was a major historic period in Australia's economic history, because the discovery of gold caused an economic boom that lasted for 40 years, spanning from 1850s to 1880s. The discovery of gold caused the workers to leave the farms and head to the gold fields, and it attracted a wave of migrants. Australia's population grew from 400,000 to 1.6 million in that period. And the miners and migrants came with their political ideas, radical political ideas, and this resulted in the in the Eureka Creek protest revolt, where for the first time the miners pledged allegiance to a flag other than the British flag in 1854. This period also saw the start of company mining and the heavy government investment into infrastructure, and the towns and cities began to grow. There was a labor shortage which saw increase in wages. So for a moment, Australia was called a workers' paradise. The economic boom caused a boom in property investment as well, which attracted capital investment from foreign countries. A number of banks sprang up to finance the property boom. This resulted in poor banking practice and corruption, leading or resulting to a banking crisis in 1891. Around the same time in 1892, gold was discovered in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. So the miners moved from the east to the west and began to influence the Western politics as well. This period also saw a number of worker strikes in the BHP workers and the maritime workers and the Shiraz workers as well. The strikes didn't, succeed, but they did achieve some political influence. In 1901, there was a vote for federation. The six colonies came together to vote, and the outcome was the establishment of the Commonwealth of Australia, as we now know it. In 1914, the World War One broke out, and this affected Australia's economy. Australians participated in the war. The war ended, and in 1929, the Wall Street stock market in the U.S. Failed. It crashed, and then this caused a global financial crisis, which affected Australian economy as well. Almost 10 years later, in 1939, the Second World War broke out. Australia participated in the war, and Prime Minister Robert Menzies sanctioned the all-in-war policy, where special purpose boards were set up to support the war effort, one of which was the Commonwealth Munition Board, headed by Essington Lewis, who was the then CEO of BHP. This set up the foundation for the industrialization of Australia post-war 1945. After the war, trade increased with the Southeast Asia, and the US invested heavily in Australia, and the mining and agriculture boomed. Australia joined the Bretton Woods system, and in 1945 to 1949, under the chiefly Labour government, the nationalization policies were instituted to nationalize the economy, nationalize the resources, and major companies such as Qantas came under government control. This was likely related to the socialist kind of policies established in Britain and some European countries post World War II to ensure employment and social services. In 1950s, the Labour government was replaced by Robert Menzies' Liberal Party, and the Menzies introduced Keynesian policies and a mixed economy, where he encouraged private business as well as some government business where he saw necessary. He cut trade deals outside of the British Empire with countries such as USSR and Germany. There was an economic boom and a wave of migrants, at least 1 million, around that time. In the early 1966, pound was abolished and Australian dollar was adopted. Japan became the main trading partner. The economy grew, and then up to 1970s under the Whitlam government, when there was economic stagnation due to British Empire weakening, British joining the European economic communities. In 1983, Bob Hawke, again under the Labour government, became the Prime Minister. Hawke instituted some economic reforms, which are very significant also in Australia's economic history. He adopted Hayek's free market policies, just as the US President and the UK Prime Minister did at the time. That's the Margaret Thatcher and President Ronald Reagan. They both adopted free market policies. So Australia followed suit under Bob Hawke. Hawke supported trade unions, floated the dollar, he deregulated the financial system, and privatized big companies such as Qantas and Commonwealth Bank. These policies saw an increase in labor productivity and set the stage for economic growth, which took off in 1992. Howard coalition government in the 1990s continued the deregulation, making Australian economy one of the leading free market economies in the world today. The economic boom that took off in 1992 lasted up to late last year. 27 years of economic growth without recession, which has been widely applauded. Australia today enjoys one of the highest minimum wages in the world. It is called a lucky country, the 20th largest export economy. GDP in 2019 was 1.9 trillion, the 14th largest in the world. The largest exports for Australia are iron ore, coal, and education. GDP by sector is 66% service, 24% mining, and agriculture 3%. China is the main trading partner to Australia today. China buys 30% of Australia's export. Australia's trade value with China grew from 3 billion in 1988 to 14 billion in 2019. A huge jump. This is associated with Chinese economic boom and infrastructure development. Chinese students make up 33% of international students enrolled in Australian university at the cost of 10 billion by 2018. So the graph shows the growth of Australian economy since 2010. The economy, the trade has sharply increased, showing the strong trade ties between the two countries. In the future, a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2017 predicts that Australia will drop out of the G20, and from its current position of 19, it will drop to 29th. In so doing, fall behind countries such as Philippines and Pakistan, which will be set for a developed country. Australia needs to invest in science and engineering and technology, increase its industrial base, and minimize its dependence on China, because it's like putting too many eggs in one basket. So it becomes an economic and security risk as well, as we see in the current COVID-19 crisis, where China is threatening to not buy Australian products, and which would significantly shake Australian economy. So Australia needs to diversify trade, find some viable trade partners besides China, and diversify its commodities as well. Migration can contribute to Australian economy as well, so long as the policies are geared in a way to safeguard Australia's security and economic interests. The Australian Institute of Migration predicts that by 2050, immigration can contribute 1.9 trillion to Australian economy. So basically, that is where we end. It's a shaky economy, but if right policies can be made in time, Australia can save itself the imminent challenges, economic challenges in the future. These are my reading list, and that's where we end. Thank you very much for listening.